History tells the story of the world and of our lives. Sometimes that history goes bump in the night. Broadcasting from the center of oddity and the supernatural in Central Florida, it's the History Goes Bump podcast.
Hello, you spooktacular people. Welcome to this 583rd episode of the History Goes Bump podcast, Ghost Tours for the Theater of the Mind. I am your host, Diane.
And this is Kelly.
Kelly, on this episode, we're going to do a life and afterlife on James Dean.
Oh, I love it. Everybody enjoys the lives and afterlives of different famous people in history.
Absolutely. And James Dean kind of has a special place in my heart. I was always very drawn to the 1950s when I was a kid. And my friends in high school, one of them was really into James Dean. I was into Elvis Presley, and our other friend was into Marilyn Monroe. So when we would get presents for each other, it was always like pictures of whoever you gravitated towards, and it was a lot of fun.
I love that. And to the day that I met you, you were still rolling your sleeves up.
I was, just like Elvis Presley would. Yep, sure thing. And James Dean, yes. And I love the 1950s music. I always tell people I was born in the wrong era. I should have been back then. I wouldn't have wanted to wear the little poodle skirts.
Right.
I wanted to dress like the guys with their jeans and rolled up t-shirts.
I'm not a dress person either.
Before we get into that, we want to welcome into the spectacular crew, Charisse.
Thank you so much for joining our Facebook group.
And now, this moment in Oddity.
Back in the spring of 2024 in Midland, Michigan, local police encountered a most unusual experience. They were summoned to investigate at Family Fare Supermarket after contractors discovered an extension cord and were able to follow it to an enclosed area of the Rooftop store sign. This was something that shouldn't have been part of the sign. When the officers broke into the enclosed area, they were shocked by what they found. Located within the sign was a mini desk, flooring, a pantry of food, a coffee maker, computer, bedding, phone, and even a houseplant. This clearly was someone's makeshift residence. The home away from home had been occupied for nearly a year by a 34-year-old woman who came out wearing an all-black outfit and ski goggles. Apparently, she wore the goggles because her eyes were sensitive to light. The woman said it was an old safe spot little known to most people in Midland, but not anymore. An officer was overheard telling the woman that, quote, "Believe it or not, you've got a nickname. Rooftop Ninja." The woman was never identified by name in the press. The supermarket didn't file criminal charges. Most unbelievable about this woman was that she actually had a job, and no, not at the store. The woman asked officers how they managed to get onto the roof to access her hidey hole. And one police officer stated, "Ladder. We're not rooftop ninjas." Luckily for the woman, the store worked with her to ensure she was able to stay in possession of her furniture once it was removed. Our question is, how she even got the furniture up there and into the sign? The whole affair certainly is odd.
That is not dead which can eternal lie, and with strange eons, even death may die. H.P. Lovecraft.
And now this month in history.
In the month of April, on the 15th in 1817, the first permanent American school for the deaf opened its doors. One co-founder of the school was Thomas Hopkins Galladay. In 1814, Thomas was visiting his family in Hartford, Connecticut. While there, he looked out the window and saw his younger brothers and sisters playing while another child stood by, apparently excluded. Thomas went outside to see what was going on, and he found out that the little girl was deaf. Her name was Alice Cogswell. The man attempted to communicate with her by pointing at his hat and writing the word hat in the dirt. Alice understood him, and this stirred Thomas to teach her more. Mr. Galladay then met her father, Mason Cogswell, who was a wealthy doctor. Alice's father was encouraged by Thomas's attempts to communicate with his daughter. He subsequently financed Galladay's trip to Europe to learn sign language due to the fact that there were no schools that taught sign language in the United States. Thomas's first experience when he got to England was with the Braidwood family, who operated many schools for the deaf in England. Their focus was on the oral method of reading lips instead of signing with hands. The family was not keen on teaching their methods to a young American man. Thomas also did not believe that lip reading would be as beneficial to a deaf person like signing would. While in England, Thomas met Abbe Sickert, who was the director of the, I'm going to try this, it's French, Institut Royal des Sourds Muets in Paris, France. Thomas accompanied Sickert and two of his faculty members back to France to learn more from them. Soon Thomas was running low on funds, and he knew that he still was not prepared enough to open his own school for the deaf in the United States. He asked one of the faculty members to accompany him back to the States, and Laurent Clerc obliged. Once the school was opened in Connecticut, Clerc became the first deaf teacher of deaf students in America. Thomas Galladay later married one of the graduates from the school he co-founded, and they had 8 children together. Thomas's youngest son traveled to Washington, D.C. to run a school for deaf children there. 7 years later, in 1864, President Abraham Lincoln signed the charter to create a national college for deaf students.
James Dean's star burned bright but fast. He starred in 3 amazing films, earning 2 posthumous Academy Award nominations before his untimely death in 1955 at the age of 24. One can only wonder what heights his performances would have reached with that kind of trajectory. Dean loved speed, and that would bring his ultimate demise. Perhaps because he had much still to do, his spirit still seems to be here. Join us for the life and afterlife of James Dean.
James Byron Dean was born on February 8, 1931 in Marion, Indiana, to Winton Dean and Mildred Wilson. Winton was offered a job as a dental technician in Los Angeles, so he packed up the family when Jimmy was 6 years old and they moved. Jimmy's mother was a fan of the arts, and she enrolled him in tap dance and violin lessons. They would read poetry together and put on skits. She even built a cardboard puppet theater for their performances. Isn't that neat?
I love that.
They built an imaginary world together. We're not sure if Jimmy was a difficult child or just a typical high-energy boy, but people said of the relationship between him and his mother that she was the only person, quote, capable of understanding him. That may be why, when his mother became ill and eventually died of uterine cancer when he was 9, that his father sent him off to be raised by his Uncle Marcus and Aunt Hortense Winslow. What a name, Hortense. This put Jimmy back in Indiana, and I'm going to attempt to say the name of this city, Indiana. The names of your cities there, holy cow.
Well, it looks like Fairmount.
Yeah, I would have said it as Fairmount, and then I was like, is it Fairmont? But it's actually Farmont, I think is how you say it.
At least according to the internet.
Yeah, they had a farm there. Hopefully I don't have to say it too many more times. The couple were Quakers, and they raised Jimmy with those values. Jimmy didn't see much of his father, who had gone off to fight in World War II and then remarried, so he sought out another father figure, whom he found in Reverend James DeWeerd. I'm not sure how to say that either. It's Deweerd. The man pastored the local Methodist church, and it was said the two had an intimate relationship, with the Reverend cultivating Jimmy's interest in things like bullfighting and car racing. The pastor also got him to try his hand at theater. Now, when it comes to the term intimate, there are many ways this could go. Some say the two were just good friends, but Paul Alexander suggested in his 1994 book, Boulevard of Broken Dreams, The Life, Times, and Legend of James Dean, that the two had a sexual relationship. This was during Jimmy's adolescence, so anything of that nature would have been sexual abuse. And Elizabeth Taylor did say that Jimmy had confided to her that a minister had abused him shortly after his mother's death.
We watched a video of Scott Michaels from Dearly Departed Tours visiting the James Dean Museum in Indiana in June of 2023, and they have nearly everything Dean owned at the time of his death. Some of these items included Jimmy's Letterman jackets, which he earned for baseball and basketball.
They were more like sweaters, but...
Right. He also was a track star, and there were lots of ribbons he had won. They also had his pole vault.
Can you imagine holding on to that all those years?
No. He clearly was very active in high school and flourished. He studied drama and competed in speech as well. When he graduated, he set his sights on college in California, so he moved to live there with his father and stepmother, Ethel Case Dean. Despite his interests in the arts, Jimmy initially enrolled at Santa Monica College and majored in pre-law. He didn't care for it and transferred to the University of California, Los Angeles, UCLA, and majored in drama. This displeased his father, with whom he already had a strained relationship. That didn't keep Dean from pursuing acting, and he won the part of Malcolm in Macbeth over 350 other actors who auditioned at UCLA. Dean decided after that to quit school and pursue a full-time acting career, which probably really didn't make his father very happy.
I can only imagine. He already didn't like him getting into school for that, and then he's just going to quit school and go try to do his thing. As is the case for most actors, he got his first big break in a commercial. This was for Pepsi and was his television debut in 1950. His next gig was also for television, and he portrayed John the Apostle in the television Easter special named Hill Number 1. And interestingly, we just happened to be recording this the day before Easter.
Indeed.
Next would come movies with a few walk-on roles. To help pay the bills, Dean also worked as a parking lot attendant at CBS Studios, and it was here that he met a radio director for an advertising agency named Rogers Brackett. Brackett gave Jimmy a place to stay and advised him that he should think about moving to New York City to pursue theater work. Jimmy decided to go, and he became one of the youngest actors ever admitted to the prestigious Actors Studio, where he studied method acting under Lee Strasberg. Jimmy wrote to his family in 1952 of this, that the Actors Studio was, quote, the greatest school of the theater. It houses great people like Marlon Brando, Julie Harris, Arthur Kennedy, Mildred Dunnock, Eli Wallach. Very few get into it. It is the best thing that can happen to an actor. I am one of the youngest to belong. And you can imagine, I don't know who he wrote that letter to specifically, but if it was to his father, it's like he's trying to impress his dad, you know?
Right. Broadway would bring Jimmy the big break he needed with the second Broadway play, The Immoralist, for which he won the Daniel Blum Award for Best Newcomer on Broadway. Dean played the part of Backer, a homosexual North African houseboy that was hired to keep the main character, Michael, company as he suffers from tuberculosis. The play was an adaptation of Andre Gide's book, The Immoralist, written in 1902. Producer and director Elia Kazan saw Dean's performance, and he decided that Jimmy would be great for the part of Cal Trask in the movie East of Eden. Kazan wanted someone like Brando, and he felt Jimmy fit the bill. When Jimmy left Broadway for Hollywood, he left behind a broken heart. He had an affair with actress Geraldine Page during the play, and Page's daughter Angelica said of the relationship, "According to my mother, their affair went on 3.5 months. In many ways, my mother never really got over Jimmy. It was not unusual for me to go to her dressing room through the years, obviously many years after Dean was gone, and find pictures of him taped up on her mirror. My mother never forgot about Jimmy. Never. I believe they were artistic soulmates." She would be one of many women to be heartbroken over Dean.
The part of Cal Trask in East of Eden was a difficult one. The movie was based on John Steinbeck's 1952 novel East of Eden about the Trask and Hamilton families over the course of 3 generations. The movie adaptation focused mainly on the character of Cal Trask, who was emotionally complex. Cal has a twin brother named Aaron, and the two are like a modern-day Cain and Abel, with Cal being like Cain, who's always seeking the approval of his father. If you've seen the movie, you probably were riveted with Dean's angst-filled performance. I certainly was. And I was also shocked to find that many of the key moments in the film were improvised by Jimmy. There's a scene where he does a dance in a bean field, and this was unscripted. After finding out that his mother, whom he'd been told was dead by his father, was actually a madam in a brothel, Cal visits her and returns home atop a train boxcar. Jimmy gets into the fetal position while riding that boxcar, and that was unscripted. The best unscripted moment, though, involved getting a shocked reaction from the actor playing Cal's father. Cal has made a lot of money speculating on beans, and he brings his father a check for $5,000 to show him how well he's done. Cal's father rejects that gift, and the script says that Cal runs away. But instead, Jimmy started to walk away and then turns to his father and grabs him in a big hug while crying. Kazan loved the moment and the shock on the other actor's face and kept it in the film. And as I was reading this, all I could think of, especially if this was method acting for him, he didn't have to stretch very far, because I could only imagine this is how it was with his own father. And perhaps this is actually what he would have done with his own father. So he's like, no, I wouldn't run away. I would, still try to get him to love me,
Yeah.
Dean was nominated posthumously for the 1956 Academy Award as Best Actor in a Leading Role for the part of Cal Trask. This was the first official posthumous acting nomination in Academy Awards history. This movie would be the only one of Dean's big three that would be released before his death, so he never got to see the success of his other two films. East of Eden is considered one of the best 400 American films of all time.
East of Eden was wrapped, and now Dean was on a roll. He would make 2 more big films before he would die. The next part he nabbed was Jim Stark in Rebel Without a Cause. Teenagers loved this movie because they identified with Jimmy's portrayal of the misunderstood Stark. Modern-day audiences criticize the film for its pacing and dialogue without keeping in mind that this was the 1950s, and teenagers were usually portrayed as good kids who always did what was right and didn't have any issues. Men in film weren't portrayed as overly emotional either. Rebel Without a Cause would change that. It put a magnifying glass on teenage angst. Jim Stark would have fit in with The Breakfast Club, and that's kind of how this film should be viewed, as a film for teenagers. And James Dean is just so cool in it, and he got top billing, which is the only time that this happened for him. His performance was critically praised even by those who thought the movie was boring. The film garnered 3 Academy Award nominations, including Best Picture, and it is included in the top 500 movies of all time. Jimmy was worried after this film wrapped that he might get typecast as a rebellious teenager.
And I put that he would fit in with The Breakfast Club because literally just this last week I was on Facebook and saw all these posts that people were showing that 40 years after The Breakfast Club was made, all of the 5 got together and had a picture together. So It was like, oh, wow. And then you look at the picture and go, holy cow, we are getting old.
Yes.
Although I have to say, Emilio Estevez looks like he's been in a time capsule. Looks just like his dad, Martin Sheen, and doesn't look like he's aged at all. And this is one of my favorite movies. So I'm just like, wow, when I went on Reddit and saw all these people just ditzing on it, I was like, holy cow, these people absolutely hate it and can't figure out why it's considered a classic. And I was like, well, I've always enjoyed it, but, who knows? I might be a little bit biased because of my love of the 50s and James Dean. And it's got Natalie Wood in it. Come on.
Hello?
He knocked typecasting out of the park with his next role. And this is my favorite James Dean film, and that's Giant. And this is a long movie. A lot of people complain about long movies. This is almost 3.5 hours. Can you imagine back then? Although I think they had intermissions and stuff, so it might not have seemed so bad to people who are watching it at the movie theater.
Let's all go to the lobby. Let's all go to the lobby. Let's all go to the lobby to get ourselves a treat.
Delicious things to eat.
The popcorn can't be beat. The sparkling drinks are just dandy. The chocolate bars and the candy. So let's all go to the lobby to get ourselves a treat. Let's all go to the lobby to get ourselves a treat.
Pass the popcorn.
Dean played Jet Rink, a Texan ranch hand who strikes oil and becomes wealthy. Giant was an epic drama and starred Rock Hudson, Elizabeth Taylor, and James Dean. And I should just stop right there. That should be enough to make this an amazing film. And now that we know what we know, I often wonder, how much was Rock Hudson checking out James Dean during this?
True.
And probably Elizabeth Taylor, too, They were all enjoying him. Dean's character Jet is willed a small piece of land by a member of the Benedict family, and it's on that piece of land that he discovers oil. And I mean, it's huge. He's pumping for it. It's like he knows it's there. They've got the little tower that goes with it, the oil drilling type thing. And when that oil comes up out of there, he is just covered in it. And since he was a method actor, I would love to know, was that did he douse himself in real oil, or did they have something else that they put all over him?
Chocolate sauce.
It's pretty thick and black, Kelly. I don't know that it's actually chocolate sauce, but maybe.
Hey, man, Hershey's makes thick chocolate sauce.
They do. This is a cattle ranch, and Hudson's character Bick Benedict, won't allow Jet to get an oil drilling permit. He wants to keep it cattle, no oil. When Bick's children become adults, he realizes that they don't want anything to do with the ranch, so he allows Jet to drill, and Jet becomes a powerful oilman. Throughout the years that the movie covers, Jet carries a torch for Bick's wife, Leslie, who is played by Liz Taylor. The movie culminates in a scene featuring Jet hosting a lavish event where he gets highly intoxicated and makes a fool of himself. This scene has been nicknamed The Last Supper since Dean died shortly after filming. In the most extreme use of method acting, Jimmy got completely inebriated for real, and unfortunately, this caused him to mumble most of the speech he makes in this scene. He already kind of mumbled when he was talking. I think he wanted to be like Marlon Brando, so he put on Marlon Brando a lot. The original, you would not have been able to understand him. So they had to overdub the scene. But at this point, James Dean has already died. So it's like, oh crud, we've got to overdub, and he's not here anymore. So the director had actor Nick Adams overdub the speech. And now when I watch it again, I'm going to listen more closely because I did not know that. Jimmy also dyed his hair gray and shaved off part of the front of his hairline to make it appear to be receding in order to look older for the film's later scenes.
Wow, I didn't realize that.
I mean, you think this guy probably had a lot of, ego and vanity and that kind of thing, but that proves that he really didn't. Because who's going to do that at the height of their career, too? Because he's going to have to wait for that hair to grow back in before he does another part, really. Dean received his second posthumous Best Actor Academy Award nomination for his role in Giant at the 29th Academy Awards in 1957. Just to put this in perspective for people, he's made 3 huge films, all of which have had Academy Award nominations for them. In 2 of them, he's been nominated for Best Actor, and this was in an 18-month period. I don't think there's a lot of actors out there that can, put that feather in their cap in that kind of time period.
And now a little break for a word about one of our sponsors.
Jimmy's next role was set to be Rocky Graziano in the 1956 film Somebody Up There Likes Me. We'll never know how he would have done, but he seemed unstoppable. Perhaps if he hadn't died young, he wouldn't have been so iconic. He was frozen forever as the young, hot, cool actor. Men and women loved him. There are rumors that one of Dean's closest friends might have been a lover, and this was screenwriter William Bast. Bast was Jimmy's roommate at UCLA and moved to New York with him. Bast wrote 2 books about James Dean. The first was published in 1956 and was titled James Dean, a Biography. The second was published in 2006 and entitled Surviving James Dean. And this book got much more personal and revealed that the two had a sexual relationship. Obviously, Bast knew it wouldn't go over well if he wrote about this in the 1950s. We believe he was telling the truth for just this reason, and James Dean definitely had sex appeal for everybody. And while Jimmy may have experimented, he loved the ladies. He didn't just date Geraldine Page in New York. He also dated actress Barbara Glenn, and their love letters sold at auction in 2011 for $36,000.
Jimmy had an intense relationship with Italian actress Piera Angeli, whom he met in 1954 when she was filming The Silver Chalice. Angeli said of their relationship, "We used to go together to the California coast and stay there secretly in a cottage on a beach far away from prying eyes. We'd spend much of our time on the beach, sitting there or fooling around just like college kids. We would talk about ourselves and our problems, about the movies and acting, about life and life after death. We had a complete understanding of each other. We were like Romeo and Juliet, together and inseparable. Sometimes on the beach, we loved each other so much we just wanted to walk together into the sea holding hands, because we knew then that we would always be together." Dean had said of Angeli, "Everything about Pierre is beautiful, especially her soul. She doesn't have to be all gussied up. She doesn't have to do or say anything. She's just wonderful as she is. She has a rare insight into life." It seemed that the two were meant for each other, but he wasn't a Catholic, and people said he had no desire to marry. Although after his death, an order for the solemnization of marriage pamphlet was found in his effects, and Pierre's name was penciled in everywhere that the bride's name was meant to go. Angeli did have a desire to marry, and she did just that in October of 1954. Marrying Italian-American singer Vic Damone. Rumors claimed that Jimmy watched the nuptials across the street from the church on his motorcycle and gunned the engine a few times. I don't know if that really happened, but it would be kind of entertaining if it did. That marriage didn't last. Angeli married and divorced again and always claimed that Jimmy was the love of her life. She OD'd in 1971 at the age of 39. And I do know that Bast, when he was writing in his book about this, said that Pierre Angeli was just dreaming about how the relationship was with James Dean, that he's like, oh, that's just her imagination making up all that stuff about them down at the beach. I think that was maybe a little bit of jealousy, because if he's penciling her name into a marriage pamphlet, he maybe was considering that he would marry her.
Swiss actress Ursula Andress was another of Jimmy's girlfriends, and she was with him when he bought the Porsche Spyder that he would later die driving. She liked to ride around Hollywood with him on the back of his motorcycle. At the time of his death, James Dean was renting a rustic log cabin-style villa located at 14611 Sutton Street in Sherman Oaks. The owner of the house was the maitre d' at Dean's favorite restaurant, Villa Capri. He paid $250 a month plus utilities. There was no actual bedroom in the house, but there was a second-floor loft. Dean filled this home with pieces of his eccentricities that included a bronze eagle, a white bearskin rug, Spanish corrida posters, a reel-to-reel tape player, a 16mm movie camera, a hangman's noose used on set, and James' beloved bongos he had been playing for years. He also had a Siamese kitten named Marcus given to him by Elizabeth Taylor. Unfortunately, the house burned down in April 1957, and a more modern house was built in its place.
Yeah, I tried to look it up and I was like, oh man. The morning of September 30th, 1955, Jimmy was up early because he had just wrapped filming for the movie Giant and he was free to go pursue his car racing. His landlord and friend, Nico Romanos, arrived at the Sherman house a little after 7 a.m. and made Jimmy a cup of coffee. They visited for a bit, and then Dean left the residence in his Ford station wagon, towing his race car, a Porsche Spyder. He stopped at his friend Bill Hickman's house to pick him up. The two men then stopped at Competition Motors for a few extra tweaks to the Spyder. The mechanic who worked on the car was Rolf Wutherick. A few other people met up with Jimmy at the garage, including his father and uncle, and the group decided to walk down to the Hollywood Ranch Market to get coffee and donuts while they waited on the car. The car was finally ready at 1:30 p.m., and the entourage headed for Salinas, where the race was being hosted. Dean drove his Spyder, with Wutherick riding as a passenger. Based on an earlier speeding ticket and the amount of distance Dean had traveled in a short time, it is believed that he was speeding when he approached an intersection at Highways 46 and 41 and crashed into a Ford sedan that was making a left turn through the intersection. The driver of that car was a college student by the name of Donald Turnipseed, and he was only injured in the crash. Neither Dean or Wutherick were wearing seatbelts. The crash was violent and left Jimmy trapped in the car with a broken neck and other fatal injuries. A nurse on scene said he had a weak pulse, and so he wasn't declared dead until he arrived at the hospital. Wutherick survived, but he was thrown from the car and his thigh bone was shattered and his jaw was broken.
Dean's body was taken back to his hometown of Farmont, and the funeral was held on October 8, 1955, at the Farmont Friends Church with 600 people in attendance. It was a closed casket for the funeral because the injuries were so severe. There was a procession to the cemetery, and 2,400 fans gathered along the route. Jimmy's grave is at Park Cemetery in Farmont. The James Dean Museum we mentioned earlier is located in Farmont, Indiana. We were pleasantly surprised to find that Dean's family cherished his possessions and didn't auction it all off to make money. Nearly everything he owned at the time of his death is located in this museum. The museum includes his 1947 Czech 125cc motorcycle, 1955 Triumph TR5 Trophy 500cc motorcycle, clothing, movie props, photographs, letters, artworks, and awards. An annual festival has been held here the last weekend in September every year since 1975.
When we talk about the paranormal and James Dean, the most prominent stories feature his Porsche 550 Spyder, with claiming it was cursed. And you know who they said it was cursed by? Mila Nurmi.
Really? Vampira?
Yeah, that's what I read. There really are some strange accounts connected to the car. But before that, we did want to mention this other oddity. So Dean played the character Cal Trask in the movie East of Eden. Then his next part that he went on to play was Jim Stark in Rebel Without a Cause. Those last names are anagrams of each other. And that's kind of weird, don't you think? Trask and Stark.
Oh, very much so.
So two of the main characters he played were anagrams of each other. Now, with the Spyder, several parts from it were salvageable and placed in other cars, the engine, transmission, and tires. It's hard to believe with the way that the car looked that the engine was able to be used again. All cars that received parts from the Spider were later involved in terrible or deadly accidents. When the car was initially brought into the shop of the new owner, George Barris, it rolled off the back of the truck and crushed a mechanic's legs. Later, the car was being used as an educational piece about driving safety, and on a trip to one event, the truck transporting the Spider went off the road and killed the driver. At another safety event, a teenager's hip was broken when the car's restraint chain snapped and the car fell on the teenager. Then somehow the Spider managed to disappear forever. And then there was the German mechanic who was riding with Dean when the accident occurred. He tried to kill himself a number of times. He was never successful, but he did go on to stab his wife 14 times.
Oh my gosh.
He died in 1981 in a drunk driving accident. Did he have survivor's guilt, or did the curse get him? Or was it like the movie Final Destination, and he was supposed to die, so death was after him all that time?
It is reported that James Dean is not at rest. He was buried in Park Cemetery there in Indiana, and his grave sits atop a small hill. People claim that Dean's ghost haunts his gravesite. James Dean was a smoker, and a legend has grown that if a visitor to the gravesite places an unlit cigarette at the headstone after dark and leaves for a bit, when they return, they will find the cigarette lit and the scent of cigarette smoke in the air. Some people report that the cigarette completely disappears. The ghost of Dean appears as well. He has been spotted sitting on the tombstone, and cold spots in the heat of summer can be felt around the grave. The area where the car crash occurred has also been apparently visited by a hitchhiking Dean who disappears when people stop to pick him up. The Porsche driven by Dean is sometimes seen cruising the highway as well. When Scott Michaels of Dearly Departed Tours was at the museum, he asked museum curator and docent Dorothy Schultz if she ever felt Jimmy there at the museum, and she said there were definitely times when she had sensed he was checking in on his stuff. Scott actually said that the lights flickered a couple of times while they were talking, and he heard a noise in the corner.
Before History Goes Bump got started, it was a blog, just for a short period of time, and then I rolled it into becoming the podcast. And so I had written a blog post about the curse on James Dean's car. And so underneath that, I noticed that we had a whole bunch of comments. And these were people who had experienced who they thought was the spirit of James Dean. So we're going to share those as well. So Julia commented, and this is in 2024, I met James Dean's ghost in Times Square when I lived there in 1990. When I'd read that, before I'd gone into all of the history and everything with James Dean, why would he be in Times Square? But now we know he was in New York and doing stuff on Broadway, so it would make sense. He was looking for Pierre Angeli. He introduced himself to me in my apartment on West 44th Street. I told him he had the wrong person and that I had never seen any of his movies. He said he had the right person. He said he was looking for his girlfriend and that I reminded him of her. I'm an Italian-American woman, and I told him I didn't know who he was talking about, but that I would find out. I became a big fan of James Dean after that. I learned that the love of his life, Pierre Angeli, committed suicide because she wanted to be with him and her dad who had passed away. So maybe the OD wasn't so much of an accident? I just don't understand why he was still looking for her. Once I found out the story, I asked God and invited Pierre to join James for eternity, for they were soulmates. I had another encounter with James Dean in the summer of 2024. I'd purchased some James Dean collectibles like a James Dean doll and a James Dean alarm clock and also a James Dean license plate and placed it over my bed. I have a camera in my room. During the night, my camera recorded a voice and it said, James. Then many orbs appeared in my room and a bright orb who I think was James Dean exited out through my picture on the wall. I'm convinced it was James Dean revisiting me. I have this on YouTube if anyone wants to see it for themselves. It's right after I clear my throat, he says, James, and there was no link, so I'm not sure where that YouTube video is.
And Anonymous also wrote under there in 2017, my parents had an interesting experience when visiting Park Cemetery in the late 80s. They had just met and were traveling to Ohio to visit with my mother's family. On the way there, they made a point to stop by the cemetery to visit James Dean's grave. When they arrived, they parked and began walking around the cemetery looking for the tombstone. They were having trouble finding it, and after searching for a while, an older gentleman who walked with a cane approached them and asked if they needed any help. My dad explained why they were there, and the man said, no problem, that he was actually related to James Dean, and pulled out his wallet to show that, sure enough, his license was listed with the last name of Dean. My dad cannot remember his name or what kind of relation he claimed to be to James Dean, unfortunately. So they walked around for a while, and the man says, "Here we are," as they were approaching the tombstone. My parents both walked ahead a bit and observed the gravesite for what my dad describes as just a short moment, probably 5 or 10 seconds or so. After this pause, my dad turned to ask a question to the man, and he was somehow nowhere to be seen. Confused, my dad jogged up the small hill nearby and looked around the cemetery. The man had completely disappeared. They took me by the cemetery a couple of years ago because I find this story so fascinating. My mother doesn't like to talk about it because it kind of freaked her out. They are such rational and level-headed people, but to this day they simply cannot explain what happened. I saw the area myself and made sure to go up the hill my father talked about. Sure enough, you can see pretty well the entire cemetery from that spot, and I can't see how a man walking with a cane could have escaped them in that short amount of time.
Makes you wonder if it was his uncle or something, who maybe had already passed away and popped up to give him a little bit of help. Another anonymous person wrote, "My daughter and her family headed down south from Salinas, California, early morning on September 21st. She was 27, so she had no idea who James Dean was. She was driving, and her boyfriend and 2 kids were all asleep, heading near Lost Hills, when she said she got really tired and started to doze off. When all of a sudden, she slammed on her brakes because she saw a person crossing the road. It was about 4 a.m, so it was still dark outside, but she swears it was a person. She said her boyfriend woke up and said, 'What's wrong?' She told him what she'd seen, and he said it's impossible for someone to be crossing out here. Later on, when she told me, I realized that the area she described was the area James Dean died. My mother was a big fan of James Dean, and I think she sent him to keep my daughter awake. Has anyone ever had this happen?" Does make you wonder, especially at 4 o'clock in the morning, somebody crossing the street. Usually they don't do that.
Right.
I don't know why her boyfriend would say it's impossible for someone to be crossing out here.
Well, I think it's kind of a remote area.
Maybe that's it.
James Dean was an iconic actor who had so much potential. His star burned bright, but not for long. Some wonder if that is why his spirit seems to continue on here in the afterlife. Does James Dean's ghost haunt people and places?
That is for you to decide. Well, I'd like to think he's still hanging around and keeping track of things. Perhaps he really is. Such a cool dude.
Indeed.
And like I said, a lot of these guys, if they don't die young, would they have been quite so iconic? I don't know.
Impossible to say.
Yeah, but it was like, that's why I had like a boulevard of broken dreams too, and it has Marilyn Monroe and Elvis Presley and James Dean. It's like they all died young at the height of their thing, pretty much. I mean, Elvis, not necessarily at the height of his career anymore, but yeah, just fascinating. I love doing these life and afterlives. Want to encourage you guys to check out our website at historygoesbump.com. And if you'd like to send us some feedback, you can do that at historygoesbump@gmail.com. Brandy had sent us a message. She said, "Hi, Diane and Kelly. I want to share a moment of synchronicity with you. I work for a company that has small buses that transport elderly people to a daycare center. I had shared the fact today to my coworkers that we do not have a bus number 13 because no one would ride it due to superstition. Another coworker added, some buildings do not have a floor 13 because of the same reason. I had to visit a nursing home today, and they give out a numbered visitor's badge to guess. Guess what number badge I got?
13?
If you said 13, you would be right. Love that synchronicity. Want to thank you all for joining us on this episode. I've been your host, Diane.
And this has been Kelly.
You take care now.
Bye-bye.
This episode is brought to you by our executive producers.
Want to keep the spooks away? Give us a review.
Test. We're back to recording.
Are we back? Baby's got back?
Mm-hmm. Hello, you spooktacular people. Welcome to this 583rd.
83rd. 583rd.
Thomas Galladay later married one of the graduates from the school he co-founded, and they had 8 children together. Apparently she clearly understood whatever he had to say to her.
Oh, my. And James' beloved bongos he had been playing for years. Babaloo.